Hi, I'm Giovanna. I am the Managing Director and founder of Sparrowly Group. Sparrowly Group is a management consultancy based in Sydney, but also work across Australia, into New Zealand and into Southeast Asia. We work across industries, so we don't niche on the industry, but we niche in our expertise. But we do quite a lot of work in the tourism, travel and hospitality space.
Awesome, thank you. So the first question then I had was, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges, both in the sort of short term and the long term, that face the tourism industry after, first of all, the bushfires that happened in 2019 and also 2020, but now also COVID-19?
Sure. So in the first instance, when we're talking about short term, it's the obvious. It's the tourism and the visitation going right down. So during bushfires, we saw that because it wasn't safe to be traveling into those areas, and having visitors in those areas would make it even more difficult for that region to combat the fires and to deal with all the people and what have you. So in the short term, it's that. And then on now with COVID-19, well, we should not be visiting and traveling. We must be staying home. And that's the only way we're going to get through this quicker. So of course, there is the financial loss, in the short term. And then that then does translate through the long term. But the government, the federal government and the state governments have done a great job in terms of funding support for small to medium-sized businesses and also for larger entities as well. It's not going to solve all their problems, absolutely not. But that's certainly going to help with some short-term relief, and that's already starting to come into play. From a long-term perspective, the whole world, the whole tourism industry globally is facing the outcome of this. Perhaps if it was just bushfires, it would be a different story. But you'll see across all social media, across the globe, the same message, from a tourist, that the tourism industry is hurting. So it's not unique to just Australia. But to really get through this and to get through the long-term, issues that might be, or challenges that might be facing, businesses right now need to be preparing for what we're calling the bounce back. So there's two ways you could deal with this. You could sit on your hands and wallow, and there is a time for that. But really, the only way to get through this is to take a step back from the business. And now is a really good time to look at, okay, well, what wasn't working in the business? Because to really look at refining your operations and your marketing and your customer segmentation will be absolutely critical. So, and in this time of downturn, to really refine that. And that's something that we're doing with a number of tourism businesses at Sparrowly Group, so that when the time comes and we can switch back on, they're ready to bounce back in a really, really big way. If a business isn't doing this right now, it's not anyone's fault but their own.
So from your perspective in Sparrowly then, how has this affected the operations of your organisation? Is it that you've switched much more to that focus on the bounce back, or how is it affecting you guys?
Sparrowly Group specifically?
Yeah,
sure. So, we're a consultancy, and as part of that, we also undertake mentoring and capacity building. So, sure, business has downturned in the sense that there's not as many projects to pitch for and proposals, and a number of projects or proposals or tenders that were out that we've pitched for have gone at an absolute standstill, for instance. And that's really hard, particularly when you put a lot of effort into putting amazing proposals forward. So that that's disappointing, but we just have had to pivot. And like every business, there's no point in me giving this advice and not doing the same thing. So we are lucky in the sense that we work across a number of industries. And we, you know, and that has been a business decision I made from day one, that we niche in our expertise, but not in the industry segments. So where our industry segments that we work in, like the community services sector and health and disability, that need help more than ever. So there is work that we are doing in the tourism space, and that's specifically around bounce back and business operations and really getting that all sorted. But we work in other industries where there is work that really still needs to be done, and if anything, it's even more critical now.
I think that's really interesting, like your model being quite diverse, having sort of lots of different kind of projects going on at the same time. And if students are kind of translating that into their own kind of skill set, that's basically saying have a diverse skill set, because that
100%.
brings with it adaptability. Yeah.
So I didn't go and do a tourism degree. It didn't exist back in 2000. I did a business degree, and I stumbled across working in tourism when I got my first job at Tourism Australia after working at Australian Rugby Union in the marketing team. So I wasn't necessarily gagging at the bit to have a tourism job. I had 2 jobs on offer, Kellogg's and Tourism Australia. I'm like, well, I don't eat breakfast cereal. It's all full of sugar and rubbish anyway. This sounds right up my alley with the Tourism Australia job. So I kind of fell into it. But I am also, and many people want to always put me in a pigeonhole me into marketing. Marketing is just one of my many skill sets, and I can thank my parents for that, because we were brought up in small business, and when I was 13 I was doing the books, and when BAS was introduced and GST, I was doing all of that because I am first generation Australian, so I was helping my parents there where English was a second language. And when I went to university, I taught my mum and my dad how to do all of that, and away they went. So I've always had a diverse skill set, and I think you should always be building up your skill set. Sure, you might specialize, you might have an area that you really love, and that's fine, but be very careful not to pigeonhole yourself. If you went to a recruiter though, they would tell you something very different. They would tell you that you are an all-rounder and you're really hard to place. Please don't let a recruiter ever put you off on the advice I'm giving you right now. Because if I listened to recruiters, I would not be where I am today. I've never gotten a job from a recruiter. It is about relationships, and to find that right job, and for someone to see that sparkle in your eye and the diversity of experience and interests that you have. And if you have that ability to be agile and to adapt your skills across, then the right business will pick you up. But build your network. That's actually what's going to get you a job out at the end of this.
Good advice. My third question then is, do you think the industry as a whole was prepared for the sort of diversity in scale of the 2019-2020 disasters? And what measures do you think might work in the future to sort of buffer against these sorts of things?
No, I don't think anyone could see this coming. But I think if this is a lesson in terms of not resting on your laurels, this is certainly a lesson in that. And the industry has started talking about, prior to these disasters, about being agile and being more customer centric and all personalization. But in many instances, it was just lip service, to be completely frank. And, it's been amazing that in 3 weeks alone, how many tourism products have been able to pivot their business online, and these great, all the great museums around the world and the virtual tours and what have you. But God forbid they wouldn't do it before, because it might, impact their revenue. But they weren't really actually thinking about the customer journey at all. So if this has forced people to really push that through, because there was so many layers of bureaucracy to get things across, then that can only be a good thing. The other thing, by pivoting their businesses and starting to be more customer centric now, because they've had to be, not because they want to be or because somebody on a stage told them to be, it has also opened up the opportunity around accessible tourism, Hayley. And I was talking to my neighbour the other day who has cerebral palsy, and she said, I feel so connected in so many ways, not only through travel, but also through, her faith. She's a big, big advocate with her church and a participant, but this has meant that, it can come, into her home, whatever you believe, but this is important to her. So in many instances, it has brought the world to her. And if this doesn't force organizations and operators to think about how they can better serve the accessible tourism market, I don't know what will.
That's a fantastic example, like a really amazing sort of a kind of positive outcome, I guess, like a model for how we should be sort of changing our thinking on things.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely.
So from your perspective then, and sort of thinking from the type of research and the type of engagements that you have with Sparrowly, in what ways do you think we can recover the tourism industry globally, but also sort of thinking about Australia and New South Wales?
Start getting organised now and start looking inwards and start cleaning out the crap that's currently sitting in your businesses, because there's plenty. Even our business, and we do this for a living. We've really spent that time going, okay, well, we need to be more, we thought we were operationally efficient, but now we need to be even more operationally efficient. So spend the time really critiquing your business. And as I mentioned, it's something we're doing with the bounce back programs that we're running, really getting under the hood, not just running, fluffy mentoring and chats, actually getting under the hood and looking at the operations pre-bushfires, pre-floods, pre-COVID. And then we're looking so that's performance review there, and then performance reviewing now to then enable putting a plan forward. So, if you're doing that yourself, you have to really be objective, and you need to look at what your business was doing pre as well as now, and see why has your business, why has it struggled, apart from the obvious. But if there has been no cash flow management, for instance, which is what a lot of businesses have, this is where a lot of businesses have just failed completely out of in COVID, particularly across industries. This is reason for concern, and really getting those operations right.
Great. And so you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm also interested. So you've talked about sort of accessible tourism as being one way that is sort of a good outcome. Not that this sort of situation there's anything particularly good about.
It's got to be a silver lining though to everything. So
yeah, exactly.
I understand that this industry is hurting. I am absolutely empathetic to it, and I understand there's losses of jobs and losses of income, and we're a small business too, so we're not sitting here in an ivory tower just looking down. We're living and breathing it too. But I think that's just an important point. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that, like, the silver lining idea is something that I think it's really important to consider, is like, how can we move forward with the industry, and is this an opportunity to transform the industry for the better in some ways? In what ways do you think we should sort of be pushing forwards into a better tourism future?
So one thing that I feel is a silver lining to COVID-19 and also the bushfires is that sense of community and that sense of care that has come out of it. We've all talked about it. Simon Sinek talks about it all the time, and I love that guy. And a lot of people have made businesses out of it, connectivity and communication and networking and managing your productivity and what have you. But sometimes it takes something like this to force it upon us, to actually stop and go, oh, okay, we need to actually really think about, and in the business sense for the tourism industry, what does the customer actually really want? Don't just think you know and say that you're personalizing. What does your customer really, really look like? And not just the high level segmentation, really getting down to those personas. You know, how do they live and breathe? What is important to them? What is their needs? What's their situation? What is the frequency of the message in order for them to actually understand that your product is for them? You know, what are the touch points? And that is really, really, really important. If people don't know how to do it, then, and you know, whether you're industry or a student studying at uni, because I don't think you get down that granular level, call me, I'll teach it to you. You know, really understanding what that, you know, what your promise is to your customer, or in fancy words, it's called the value proposition. But essentially, what is the promise, and how are you going to deliver on that promise? Not just words, really think about it, because when we switch on that tap, the floodgates will open, and people domestically, in the first instance, will want to go on holidays. There is a significant high value traveller set here in Australia who will be gagging at the bit to go and do something, even if they can't go overseas initially, to spend the time working out who it is that you want to attract, because it can't be everybody. Sorry, that's not your target market, you know, and get your marketing right.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me.